Since the dawn of time, man has asked the question, how do I get on an airplane without the airplane landing? Well, maybe not since the dawn of time, but at least since the invention of the airplane, which really wasn't all that long ago. With the first successful parachute jump from a plane in 1911, humanity discovered it was easy enough to jump out of a plane midair. The hard part was jumping back on. Seeing as the plane works just fine without people jumping on and off, this didn't really bother anyone until World War II, where airborne combatants were deployed at a scale never before seen. With parachutes, you could drop a whole bunch of men into enemy territory behind enemy lines, where it would be impossible to land a craft safely. This meant the men would then have to make their own way home. If they got into trouble and couldn't secure a safe landing strip, extracting them would be very difficult. If only you could take them out the same way you put them in. The Allies had a partial solution in the glider snatch pickup. Gliders were unpowered troop-carrying aircraft that were towed by larger planes to the battlefield, where they were released to glide to the ground so the troops could disembark. The Allies developed the glider snatch pickup to recover gliders from the battlefield in the same way that they had been deployed, from a passing plane. It worked like this. The glider had a length of nylon tow rope attached to the front. This rope ended in a loop. With two poles, you could suspend the loop in the air. The recovery craft, typically a Douglas C-47 Skytrain, was fitted with an extended arm that held a hook and winch. The pilot would fly over the glider and try to catch the upheld loop with his hook. When he did, the winch would reel out from the plane so the glider wouldn't suddenly feel the shock of the pull in one violent motion. Instead, the winch's brake was gradually applied, which slowly stopped the extension of the hook line, allowing the glider to build up speed smoothly and take off. A single plane could pick up two gliders with this technique, and it allowed casualties to be airlifted without landing a plane. Of course, for you to be extracted in this manner, you would need the glider, and sufficient clearing for the glider to take off. You'd probably also want someone who knows how to pilot a glider. Now, I've been in plenty of situations that called for a hasty escape, but in none of them did I have access to those things, which means never in my life has the glider snatch pickup been a viable method of rescuing me. Enter American inventor Robert Fulton. After World War II, Fulton had been drafting up plans for a flying car when he witnessed a demonstration of a plane picking up a package with the glider snatch pickup technique. Fulton saw the potential this could have in rescuing individuals, but he also saw the limitations. In theory, you could use the same technique to rescue a person without the glider, and it had been tried successfully, but it was dangerous and impractical. First, the recovery craft obviously had to fly in real low to catch the tow line, so you needed to be out in the open. Secondly, the thresholds for stress one can endure before braking are different between a glider and a human. The gradual winch braking helped alleviate stress undergone to the glider during contact, but contact was still quite forceful, and human beings have feelings. Soft, squishy feelings. Fulton began working on improvements to the design, and by 1950, the US Air Force and CIA were running experiments on the Fulton Surface-to-Air Recovery System, or the Skyhook. The Fulton Skyhook came as a kit that could be given to servicemen on deployment or airdropped to them when they were in trouble. Inside the kit was a full-body harness, 500 feet of high-strength braided nylon line, an inflatable balloon, and some tanks of helium. The rescuee would put on the harness, which was attached to the line, which was attached to the balloon. They would use the helium tanks to inflate the balloon and then release it into the air. Then they would sit at the end of the line with their back to the wind and await pickup. A flashlight could be used to direct an inbound pilot. There were lights and flags along the balloon line to indicate altitudes to the pilot, and he would attempt to fly into the line at an optimal point. The recovery craft was fitted with a locking mechanism at the front, in between two horns that were intended to catch the line and feed it into the mechanism. If the horns missed the wire, there was a chance you'd just crashed your plane into it. So the horns had deflector cables extending to the wingtips. This protected the wings and propellers from the balloon line in case of an unsuccessful catch. When the horns did catch the line, the locking mechanism clamped down on it and cut it at the top, releasing the balloon above but holding onto the line below. The man at the bottom of the line would begin to rise vertically as the top of the line is carried away by the plane. He'll only feel the full horizontal force once he's trailing behind the plane at the same altitude. This is a much gentler application of force than in the glider snatch pickup technique, and the vertical lift means you require much less clearance. The locking mechanism that holds the line is winched, so that the rescuee can be pulled into the plane mid-flight. This process takes about 6 minutes. The first live experiment was performed on a pig, as pigs have a similar nervous system to humans. After lifting, the pig reached speeds of up to 125 miles per hour. Due to the unfortunate aerodynamic properties of a pig, it was spinning wildly the entire time. The pig survived, but by the time it was on board, it was extremely disorientated. After it had regained its composure, it attacked the crew. The first human test was performed in 1958, with a Marine extending his arms and legs to avoid the pig's dizzy fate. This eliminated the spinning problem and effectively signaled the success of the Fulton Skyhook. By the 60s, it was being used by the US Air Force and the CIA in operations in Vietnam and elsewhere. Perhaps the most interesting example of its usage is Project Cold Feet, the first operational usage of the Skyhook. In 1961, the CIA had learned of an abandoned Soviet research outpost on a drifting floe of ice in the Arctic. Because the station was literally built on a floating sheet of ice, it was a real pain to get to and from, and the Soviets had to abandon it after the airstrip was destroyed in a collision with another ice floe. The CIA saw this as an opportunity to snoop around the Soviets' research, and in 1962 parachuted 2 agents to the station. The Fulton Skyhook was used to recover the agents 72 hours later, as well as Soviet equipment. The recovered equipment provided evidence the Soviets were conducting advanced research in the detection of submarines under ice in an effort to develop Arctic warfare techniques. Now, if you didn't know this already existed, and I told you you could board a flying plane by attaching yourself to a cable with a balloon and letting the plane crash into it, you probably wouldn't be volunteering to try it out. It doesn't sound possible, and it definitely doesn't sound safe. But in all its years of use, the Fulton Skyhook only hurt one person that I'm aware of. In 1982, a US airman was picked up by a Lockheed MC-130 during a training exercise in Germany, but one of the horns on the front of the craft suffered a failure and dropped the airman to his death. Other than that one instance, the Fulton Skyhook seems to have been a pretty safe and effective answer to the question, how do I get on an airplane without the airplane landing? And yet, the Skyhook gradually fell out of favour as humanity realised it had been asking the wrong question all along. The real question was, how do I stop an airplane without the airplane landing? And the answer was helicopters. Aerial recovery became a much easier task with the advent of the helicopter, which, unlike a plane, could hover in one place and ferry personnel between it and the ground with something as simple as a rope ladder. Over the Fulton Skyhook's lifetime, helicopters became more reliable, and today we have helicopters capable of lifting great weights, flying long distances, and mid-air refueling. These advancements made the Skyhook more and more obsolete, as helicopters became better equipped at dealing with situations where once only the Skyhook would have worked. In 1996, the Air Force Special Operations Command ceased maintaining the capability to deploy the Fulton Skyhook. Assumedly, the next step in the progression here is jetpacks, but they still seem to be in the unreliable piece of shit stage of development, and the technology will need to progress as it did for helicopters before their standard issue. So if you need to disappear into the sky at a moment's notice, I hope you're a Marine waiting on a helivac, because outside of that you're probably out of luck. Maybe you could stand on a bomb. Or maybe you could watch more of my videos, guaranteed to have you floating in the clouds in mere moments, and you can subscribe to see more as I make them in the future. You can join the channel membership to support me monetarily, and until next time, stay safe. It's fine. Other than that one instance of the Fulton. The pilot would fly over the glider and try to catch the upheld Luke with his hook. Fuck you. God, Luke. How do I get out of an air... No, Jesus Christ, what's going on? Can't read.